I'm going to give a little bit more background to one of my favorite verses, Micah 6:8. And I'm going to read it from the Message translation, and then we'll dive right in. Now, understand, if you're new to all this, Israel is a lot like us, just a bunch of mess-ups. And Israel's history is mess up after mess up after mess up. They get their crap together, they start doing right, and then all of a sudden, they mess up. And they get their crap together, they start doing right, and then they mess up. And it's just this constant cycle. And then in comes Jesus, kind of being the cycle breaker, and giving Israel and humanity this moment where they can actually get their stuff together and have it together and be able to deal with not having it together, and come back to a place where they can be redeemed over and over again without having to, in some cases, sacrifice lambs and calves and give offerings. And you'll see in one person's opinion, what else can I do? And you'll hear it and you're like, whoa, calm down. So Micah 6, verse 1 starts like this. This is from the Message translation. Listen now to God. Take your stand in court. If you have a complaint, tell the mountains. Make your case to the hills. And now, mountains, hear God's case. Listen, jury earth. For I am bringing charges against my people, and I am building a case against Israel. Now, Micah is a prophet, and so prophets just tell the cold, hard truth. And it's just one of those things. And so Micah, on behalf of God, says this. He says, Dear people, how have I, God, done you wrong? How have I burdened you? How have I worn you out? Answer me. I delivered you from a bad life in Egypt. I paid a good price to get you out of slavery. I sent Moses to lead you, and Aaron and Miriam to boot. Remember what Balak, king of Moab, tried to pull, and how Balaam, son of Beor, turned the tables on him. Remember all those stories about Shittim and Gilgal. Keep all of God's salvation stories fresh and present. And so Israel kind of responds like this. How can I stand up before God? And how can I show proper respect to the Most High God? Should I bring an armload of offerings topped off with yearling calves? Would God be impressed with thousands of rams? Would buckets of barrels and olive oil be okay? Or would he even be moved if I sacrificed my firstborn child, my precious baby, to cancel my sin? Right? Like, whoa, calm down, guy. And Micah responds to Israel and says, God's already made it plain how to live and what to do, and what God is looking for in humanity. It is quite simple. Do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. And don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously. And again, this is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. When I took on this Sunday of preaching, I didn't actually read my calendar. I just knew it was the 15th, and it was in January, and I was like, hey, I've got an opening. Cool, I'll help out. And then last Sunday, Jason told me, hi, you get to preach on Martin Luther King Sunday. I was like, dang it. And I sent him that emoji that has the really mad face with the expletive word on it. And I was like, oh! Because this is one of those Sundays that can carry a lot of weight, right? I mean, on Martin Luther King Sunday, you kind of have this responsibility to talk about social justice, talk about mercy, talk about compassionate love. And if only there were passages in the Bible that actually talked about that. And this is why I love the translation that Eugene Peterson, the writer and translator of the one who made the Message Bible, him and his team, they add so much poetic language to Scripture. And he adds so much to this passage this morning, especially in verse 8. To take from it not only to seek justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly, but it's actually quite simple what God's asked us to do what is fair and just, to be compassionate and loyal in our love, and to not take ourselves too seriously, but to take God seriously. It's like the chef's kiss. I often wonder when that passage first hit me like it does. when Micah 6:8 really became something that I kind of leaned in on. I can't really remember reading it, the how or why behind it. However, it was probably when I was across the road doing student ministry, and it inspired us, me and my wife, to name my son that you saw sitting beside me and with the glasses. His name is Micah. And it's that name with purpose kind of thing for us. Any name that we kind of dibble-dabbled around, we wanted to have purpose behind it. And so this is what we want to see out of Micah. And sometimes he is the complete antithesis to justice and mercy and love for people. But every once in a while we catch these glimmers of where he wants to see people treated fairly, where he treats his brother kindly sometimes, and he actually loves on people. We see glimmers. And so in my own journey of deconstructing and rethinking and listening to people and stories, this passage has always been this kind of guardrail of sorts. Justice and mercy and love. They're pretty good guardrails to keep us kind of centered. Martin Luther King said a lot in his time of preaching. I shared something this morning on Instagram that talked about some lines that you probably won't see people share because they're just too tough to chew on. But he said a lot of things that we can chew on that's like, maybe I want to add that. And I don't want to sit on the man too much, but I want to sit on the messages that he constantly put out there when we were in the middle of civil unrest, when we were in the middle of war, when we were in the middle of just not taking care of our neighbor no matter what color they were. And it was much of what got him killed. And so much of the thinking and rethinking that I do now is not only on theology, but it's also on systems in life and how they function, whether that's correctly or incorrectly. And so one of our three big phrases from this morning's passage, or the three big words, were justice, mercy, and love. And they may remind you of some stories from the Bible. Those just three words, they often appear all over the place through the Bible. But they may remind you of one particular story called the Good Samaritan and Jesus' parable on the Good Samaritan. So if you've never heard it, short story goes that a man's walking by and gets crap beat out of him by a band of robbers. And apparently this happened a whole lot on this stretch going to a town called Jericho. And a servant of the local temple and a priest from that local temple pass by, and they do nothing, and in fact they run off because they're pretty afraid that the same thing's about to happen to them. And then in a plot twist, a person walks by called a Samaritan. And if you think white-black, if you think white-black in slavery times and in the 60s and even sometimes today, this is kind of that. This is Jew and Samaritan. This is white-black. These are two people who don't get along. And every Jewish person who's hearing this story hears the Samaritan and is thinking, yeah, they're not going to do anything. We're Jews. They're not going to help us. But in fact, it's the complete opposite. The Samaritan stops by, bends down, picks him up, takes him to the nearest inn, which in that day was like a makeshift hospital of sorts, so that he could be healed and cared for. And in fact, the Samaritan not only drops him off there, but offers to pay for the night and however long it takes. And Jesus was basically saying, not only should we help those in need, but we should also expect and realize that help can come from those who would, oh my gosh, edit this out of the podcast. We should help people, and we should expect help from people that we would least expect it from. There we go. A theologian named Shane Claiborne, along with Martin Luther King, added some commentary to the Good Samaritan passage. And Shane Claiborne and Martin Luther King say this: we are called to be the Good Samaritan and lift up our neighbor out of the ditch. But after you lift so many people out of the ditch, you start to say, as Dr. Martin Luther King said so well, maybe the whole road to Jericho needs to be transformed. I think one of the reasons that I finally left full-time church ministry and went into teaching was because of the who that I could and would encounter. Conservative Christian contexts do a whole lot of good work, and never hear me bash them. But in my time, there was something always missing. There was always a call to something more, something deeper. A call to different people from every different walk of life. One of the truest phrases that you'll ever hear is that the most segregated time of day is the Sunday services. But also Wednesday night services, Sunday night services, and youth group meetings in many places. And at one point, I had had enough. I wanted to see vibrancy when I looked out towards students, and I wanted to see the tearing down of walls between races and cultures and orientations and labels. And I couldn't do that in places where I served. And so for that and many other reasons, I made the jump. And so now in education, those things are very much still there. And there is still much red tape and hoops that we have to jump through. But the bravery of many students to have conversations that actually matter is astounding. So much more than their adult counterparts. My students inspire me, and my faith inspires me to continue pressing forward with what I read about in the scriptures, especially in this passage this morning. And it makes me believe that I can and I will make a difference, and that people and humanity can and will make a difference, even if it does take a lifetime journey of changing the entire road that gets us there. So I'm going to talk about justice, mercy, and love. When I think of justice and doing what is right and fair, I will tell you that I do not think about North Carolina education system or the United States education system, oddly enough. You might see a teacher or two nod about that, if that's ever said in public. You might see a couple of them in here. My favorite example of that point is this year, actually. I have a student named Billy. Obviously, his name is changed for protection in this. He wasn't born here. In fact, his little brother speaks way better English than he does, and his dad speaks some broken English. Billy speaks zero English. And so between him, my Spanglish, and Google Translate, I teach math, and I have some of my Latinx students around try to help me translate math terms which don't translate very well from English to Spanish. And so while Billy may not speak English, I guarantee you that he can outmath over half of my class, which was surprising, not because, that he wasn't from here and blah, blah, blah. It was just surprising. That was the last thing I expected. And it's mostly because he works hard. I will tell you that if you ask a teacher, any teacher, they will tell you that one of the biggest things from COVID that we deal with students now is just overall apathy. And not just apathy toward learning, apathy toward everything. And obviously that's not every student, but for a majority of students, it's just the apathy of everything. They could just care less. They could. And it's devastating, not just because of me being a teacher, but just me as a human. Like, I know that in 4 years, there are students who are going to be able to vote, and it pains me to think, like, if their apathetic attitude continues, what could be? And so Billy works hard, and it shows. He has somewhere always above a C. He always works hard, does the assignments. He's like an average student, a lot of times on his phone too. And so the horrible thing about this is that he will have to take some stupid EOC that he will likely not score proficiently on. Why? Well, I learned, because of a sheet of paper, that he only gets an English to Spanish dictionary for his test. That will be in all English. And so when I went to our ELL coordinator, she was like, let me send an email and I could call and see what the reality is for this, because she was just as ticked off as I was. And come to find out, North Carolina is an English-only state when it comes to testing. They do not do translations of tests in North Carolina. And I was like, well, that is the stupidest, most 1960 thing I've ever heard in my life. We are in 2022, 2023 now, where he can literally click a button on Google, and the whole screen translates for him. You can't tell me this is hard, especially when all of our testing is digital now. Like, we have paper copies, but a lot of our stuff is digital now. But all English states. So while he's doing fairly well in my class and exhibiting all the skills I could ever ask of him, North Carolina will just see him as just another low score, a number. Doing what is right and fair for this kid is the exact opposite of what he is experiencing. And I am nowhere near perfect, and I don't have the time to adequately do what is necessary to let this kid be successful, and to do what is necessary for him and other ELL students that I have in my other blocks. But you can best believe that justice is going to flow down this mountain, because I'm going to find somebody, and I'm going to knock down somebody's door, and I'm going to have his pseudo picture with me and his name that I created. And I'm like, this kid probably scored not proficient. Fingers crossed that he does somehow. Probably scored not proficient because of y'all. Because of your theory that they have to learn English right away. And so, sorry, I'm trying to gather myself. Why wouldn't we do that? And in any other situation that could exist in the highways and the byways of our lives, why wouldn't we just do the next right thing for humanity? Because when we could step out for this kid and get him the tools for success that he needs, not only are we helping him, but we're helping his family too. Why would we not be known as the school district or the system or the state that is for every single child, and thus also the families therein? Or maybe loving mercy. Maybe loving mercy is easier. Compassionate in our love. At the end of the day, I think, Micah.
He's good.
He's good? Am I a decent parent?
Yeah.
Like, scale of 1 to 10, what would you give me?
6.
All right. Note for the podcast. He said 6. My son is a jerk. Wow. See? The honesty and the truth from the mouth of babes. Here's why he said that. You ready for this story? And like I said, decent is about a 6, right? I would have taken 7 because God knows I'm a C student when it comes to being a human. But God also blessed me with at least one smart kid. I'm just kidding. With 2 energetic, brilliant, tornadoes of two sons in Micah and Judah. Micah, that you just heard from, that was a grave mistake on my part. Micah has been going through therapy to handle his ADHD brain, and which it began to like manifest as just like fits of anger and no attention to detail and things like that, especially just the anger part. And so we put him into therapy because we wanted him to have the necessary tools to handle those things. We also want our sons to realize that like therapy's okay. Like therapy is actually a good thing, and actually a great thing too, and necessary for anyone that needs it. And his therapy has like really truly helped him alongside the meds. And so this past Tuesday we were working on his math homework. And so it had these ideas of addition and subtraction, multiplication and division. And so it was front and back. And our brains, I guess, work differently. And I guess I don't want to be one of these parents that's that new math, right? You may have heard that. They teach this new math stuff. And I'm fairly certain I probably learned subtraction this way to start with. But the way he was doing subtraction was hurting my brain, and I'm a math person. And he was taking some from this and putting it over there, and I guess it was to make it easier to do the subtraction, but it was not easier for me. And I was getting frustrated, and my own ADHD medicine was wearing off, and so my brain was like, hey, a giraffe has like a 30-foot neck, and how does that vomit work, and things like that. And so shiny objects were everywhere, and finally, like, I sat down with him, and I was erasing something. There was a wet spot on the page. And, you know, like when you erase something, you hit that wet spot, it's over. That thing had a hole like that big in it, and I threw that pencil across the room, and that sheet went with it, and I was done. And he just sat there, and I had to walk away. And I ended up going back and picking it up, sitting it down. I was like, hey, work on the two other, there was like 3 issues on the page. I was like, go work on the other 2 issues. I'm going to go get a piece of paper, and we'll fix the other one. Came back, and I sat down, and he had that look, right? And he had that look of like utter just, I'm done with everything. And so he had that look of, I'm just done with everything. I was like, son, what's wrong? And the tears started welling up, and they started coming out a little bit. I was like, buddy, what is wrong? He was like, Dad, this story, yeah. He's like, Dad, I'm giving you my best work. And I was just like, oh. And so I squatted down in front of him, and I said, son, I know you are. I know you are. And, God, why are you in here? And I was like, buddy, I know you are, and you are so brilliant. And I kissed his forehead. I was like, I know you're giving me your best work, and you are the best work. You do it all the time. And we never have issues. And we're just butting heads right now. And I'm sorry for the way I acted. And I was just doted on him, how brilliant he was, and how much I loved him. And so, one of those 6 out of 10 parenting moments where I started at a 4 or a 3, and I kind of rose up to a 6 because I healed the thing. And so with them, I told him all of that just happened was my fault. And I got some paper, and I let him do his work on a different paper, and he explained to me what he was doing, and we ended well. And with them, for better or for worse, I wear my emotions on my sleeve because I want them to see that. I want them to know it's okay to feel. But it's not okay to stay hidden about your feelings. And when we stay less hidden about our feelings and we really have trusted people to lean in on, we can give and receive that compassionate love that I hope I showed them. We can give and receive that compassionate love, that mercy that our souls desire. Love you, kid. Hey, I got a thumbs up. That means a 7, yeah? 7? Okay, whatever. Update. he came in the next day talking with his mom about standard subtraction algorithm. Now, in all my years of mathing, never heard that. Never once I've heard it called that. And so Emily was like, hey, what's standard subtraction algorithm? I was like, oh, no. No idea. That's like new math. And so, does anybody else know what it means? Anybody? No? Yeah? No? Remember stacking? So when you would see 100 minus 37, you would stack them. Standard subtraction algorithm. And so he was like, yeah, it's just stacking. I was like, I'll take a bow because I taught you that not too long ago. You're welcome. And so loving compassion. It's giving and receiving that mercy that our souls desire. And it can happen at any point, and sometimes at the hardest moment when you need to give it out the most. Just don't want to, but you have to. But it's that final thought of having trusted people, of talking to people, of listening to people. That's that last part of the passage, and that's what it looks like in real life. Not taking ourselves seriously, but taking God seriously. And I don't know anything about anything. My dad was, we always called him the jack of all trades and master of none. Like, he knew a little bit about a whole lot. And he could do a whole lot. And especially if you got him and my uncle and some other guys around, they could build a house. And they did. And I lived in it in the latter part of my high school years. But I don't know a whole lot. And I'm very honest about that. Especially, like, I come to the Bible like that. Like, yeah, I have a master's degree in this stuff, but, like, I still, in the everyday life, I come to this faith thing, this Bible thing, as a newbie. And I come to other faith traditions and beliefs like that, too. I come to each human like that. I don't know anything about any of you. Like, I know little things, like, y'all were in the Methodist tradition for 20 years, got burnt, and y'all moved out somewhere in the cut. Like, that's about sums it up as far as I know. And you've got a few kids, and we worked together with one of them at a Habitat house, right? You've been through a whole lot of medical stuff, and more recently than you would care for, right? Me and Chad worked together for a year. We got to know each other. I don't know everything about Chad. We've had some times together, though. We've had some good times together for sure. I don't know everything about Jason, even though, out of everybody in here, out of everybody in here, we've probably been knowing each other longest between me and the person. But I am willing to sit with you for a lifetime and learn. The ins and outs, the ups and downs, the ugly and the beautiful too. And I think that is something we have to do. That's when we stop taking ourselves seriously and we start taking God more seriously. And when I do that, and when you do that, and when we take it seriously, we start taking in the divine presence of God within every person. We start taking that in seriously. Every person you come in contact with has that small sliver of divine within them. And I think we need to realize that more and more and more every single day. That even the people we would disagree with the most, we need to see the divine in them first and not necessarily what they spout out from their mouth or from their fingers. And the more we make ourselves vulnerable to the stories of people around us, and maybe even our own stories, making those vulnerable to other people, the more the presence of the divine can be manifested, and the more sacred and safe the places in our lives can become. I think practicing justice, mercy, and love daily, and being vulnerable to others when you are not doing those things, are the practices of our faith that can fix the many roads that we have that lead to our Jerichos, to those families that we don't really want to, those family members that we don't really want to talk to, or the roads that lead to the Jericho that could be our jobs or our homes, the schools, the systems in our lives that do not help the vulnerable, the needy, the weak, the left behind, the left out, or the just plain forgotten. And so a little bit more right and just, a little bit more mercy and love, and a little less of me, a little less of you, and a little bit more of divine. Amen.